Good evening. I'd like to call the business meeting of the Portland Board of Public Education to order. It is Tuesday, November 26, 2019. The Portland Board of Public Education is meeting at Casco Bay High School in the Great Space. May I please ask the superintendent to call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Mr. Atkinson.
Here.
Alphonse.
Here.
Ms. Bondo.
Présente.
Ms. Figdor.
Here.
Ms. Davis. Here. Ms. Morioni.
Here.
Ms. Thompson.
Here.
Trevorrow.
Here.
Mr. Inabanza.
Here.
Mr. Norris.
Here.
Ms. Power-Rakowski. Mr. Samuntu.
Présent.
Mr. Abdirahman.
Here.
And Chair Rodriguez.
Present. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. Real quickly, for the report of the chair, I don't have very much to say. It's been a somewhat slow last couple of weeks since our last meeting. But one thing I did want to thank board members and the community for being present and allowing me to do this here is giving the State of the Schools address at City Hall last week on Monday. I was immensely proud to be able to represent Portland Public Schools and share with our community all the accomplishments that we've been able to document over the last year, and obviously to communicate the many challenges that we face as a school district moving forward. I was trying to be as thoughtful and purposeful with my delivery of that address. And I felt proud of the message that I delivered, and I feel like it's a message that resonates certainly with this board and what I hope resonates with this community. Also, wanted to let the board and the public know that later tonight, at the end of our meeting, we're going to have an executive session to take the next step towards the superintendent's evaluation this year. So that'll be how we'll finish our evening. And the last thing, just prior to the meeting, we held the caucus to take a straw vote on the chairperson for the upcoming year, and that official vote, will take place at the inauguration next Monday, which we're scheduled to start at 4 p.m. at City Hall and Council Chambers. And then that would lead us to the following meeting, December 3rd, which will be our first official meeting of the year, where we'll have a new board, so to speak, with one change in board members, with Ms. Davis sadly leaving us, and a new exciting career as a board member beginning with Mr. Adam Burke. So we're excited for the changes and what's coming, what's in front of us as a board. And tonight will be the last meeting of this. So I think we should get started with it. Superintendent? One second. I can't. All year long, I haven't got that one right once. For the report of the students, we were scheduled for a PATH report. But seeing that we were not able to have a Casco Bay High School report this month, I've asked Mr. Inabanza to please report on Casco Bay, and he's agreed to do that. It's a bit of a short notice. I've been able to get him notice of this since yesterday, so he scrambled and was able to prepare a report for us. So Mr. Inabanza, you have the floor.
Thank you. Sorry. So I'd like to start by saying thank you to the entire board for making this experience what I would say was a great learning experience for me, and it kind of like felt like family, so to speak. And the work that we did over the course of the year was incredible and amazing. And I'm glad that I was a part of like the many things that we got to do this year. So as Mr. Rodriguez said, I scrambled to do this, but there's not really much happening at Casco. Other than like freshmen, I ended the expedition called You Are on Indigenous Land, where they presented to third through fifth graders at Lycett and Ocean Avenue, and taught lessons for 30 minutes about Wabanaki cultures and people, and the different tribes that are in Maine, and making people, especially like students at a young age in elementary, to realize how the importance of like the history of this land. Sophomore are in like the final stages of their expedition called Beyond Borders, starting the migration of people around the world, and do presentations about their countries to a panel of experts and parents, and the public are invited December 17 here at Casco Bay in the afternoon. For juniors, we just like finished the research stage of our expedition called Public Policy. And if people don't know what public policy is basically we, as juniors, study policy and look at the inequities that are in our society and look in ways in which like we can find a way to reduce those inequities through policy, through public policy. And we're going to have our culmination December 18 through 19 at the Portland Public Library. All are invited. The seniors kick off their senior expedition, intersection between a personal passion and a need for the world. And that's a really long one. It lasts from now until March. And they're just starting whatever they want to, basically. It's basically like public policy, but at the same time, it's their passions as well, and like it's just a way for them to explore what they want to do after high school. The seniors had a task to complete one college application by December 6th, so that's coming up. And march to the post office. A tradition that seniors at Casco Bay do is that they march all through Congress Street to the post office and then mail their letters and then go on to City Hall, and the festivities begin there. Everybody's welcome. It starts probably 1:45 to 2. It's a great experience, but it's kind of cold too.
What's the date?
Number 13. Lastly, a new tradition at Casco is that we're gonna have our first Alumni Navigator Award and Teacher Navigator Award. And if you can see those two plaques over there behind, those are like the plaques in which we put the winners of the Navigator. The Navigator is Casco Bay's highest award that a student can get. It happens, we give the award twice a year. Probably like at the end of like the first semester and at the end of like the second semester type, but we use trimesters though. I never had the opportunity to win this award, but it's like in Casco Bay, we take it really seriously. And I think it's a great opportunity that alumni that have graduated have an opportunity to also put their name up there and be navigators and show that, like, you know, they're navigating their way through life and they're navigating other people through. And also teachers as well, because I feel like some teachers need to be appreciated for the work that they're doing. And winners will be announced in January. So, yeah, we're pretty much excited and happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Mr. Navansa. Report of the superintendent. Mr. Botana, you have the floor.
Thank you. I also scrambled to get my remarks together for tonight. But I would like to begin my comments by recognizing the Maliseet, the Micmac, Penobscot, and Passamaquoddy tribes, known collectively as the Wabanaki, or people of the Dawnland, the original inhabitants of the land on which our city and schools stand, and we're honored to have their children among our students in our schools today. I would like to thank all of the outgoing board members who are at their last business meeting tonight. Our student representatives are concluding their terms tonight. Anna Power-Rakowski officially concludes her second year on the board representing PATHS. Of course, she graduated in June, and we knew that she would not be around for most of the fall, but we're grateful for her 2 years of service here on the board. Also leaving after tonight are members Joseph Nabanza, who you just heard from, representing Casco Bay High School, Ali Abdirahman, representing Deering High School, and John Dole Norris, representing Portland High School. All three of these remarkable young men have made an impression on all of us. You're a testament to the amazing leadership potential in our schools. I have unending optimism about today's youth, and you represent vivid examples of why that optimism is so warranted. John Dell will be graduating this year, while Joseph and Elise still have a senior year to come. Regardless of what you do next, I hope that your term on the board has been an opportunity to find your leadership voice, and it will inspire you to continue to exercise that voice in the next phase of your life. Also ending his term tonight is Portland Adult Education's first ever school board representative, Axels Samuntu. Axels has been a powerful addition to this board. His tenure represents our growing recognition of the central role of Portland adult education in the Portland Public Schools portfolio under our Portland promise. Adding a fifth student representative representing Portland Adult Ed is just an example of this direction. Axels has reminded us consistently about our commitments to Portland adult education. He has spearheaded improvements in our facility at Cathedral, including student wireless internet and an improved phone system with intercom capabilities. Beyond this advocacy, Axels is such an accomplished young man that he represents the indomitable potential of so many of our new Mainers. Axels, thank you for showing the way for future Portland adult education representatives. You've set a high bar, but I am confident that those following you will strive for the same level of effective advocacy that you've brought to the work. I'm sure that you will be successful at whatever you choose to do next, and I look forward to seeing the difference that you're going to make in our community.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Finally, I would like to wish Board Member Lori Davis a fond farewell. Ms. Davis, as you heard earlier, is completing her 9th year, so that's 3 terms here on the board. And prior to her service as a board member, Ms. Davis also worked for the district for 10 years. So combined, she has nearly 20 years of service, of formal service to the board. And I say formal because she was also a parent, volunteer, and an advocate for schools before that. During my tenure, Ms. Davis has been a strong voice for collaboration with the City Council, particularly around our budgets. Her advocacy on this issue after the 2019 budget was central to a complete redesign of our budget process last year, which led to a much more deliberative and, as a result, improved budget process. She works tirelessly and is consistently well-informed and prepared on issues before the board. While there have been times that we've not been on the same page, I can say without a doubt that I've always learned something from those interactions and have become a stronger superintendent and leader as a result. On a personal note, I will miss our monthly far-ranging conversations. I've learned a lot about Maine from those conversations, whether it's about the role of island schools in preserving island viability, the history of taxation in the state, or how to pronounce Mount Desert Island. I hope that we will continue to develop our friendship as you move on to other significant pursuits. I know that you have a great deal still to give to our community and our state, and I wish you great success in those pursuits. Last Wednesday, we canceled classes at Casco Bay High School and Portland Arts and Technology High School because of a threat against a group of students at Casco Bay. The social media threat began with one student calling others by the N-word. This escalated online until an unknown student joined and made what was a credible threat. Working closely with the administration and law enforcement, we determined at 9:30 p.m. that it was unlikely that the matter would be resolved by the time school started the next morning, and decided to cancel school to give law enforcement a chance to get to the bottom of the threat. That proved to be wise, as by 9 a.m. on Wednesday morning, Portland Police, working with neighboring police departments, had identified and taken an individual into custody. I would like to thank the Portland Police Department for their tireless work in chasing down every lead throughout the night. As we continue to work through the challenges of officer-worn cameras in our schools. This was a great example of the strong working relationship between the police department and school staff, and one more reason why we must continue to work together to establish strong protocols for making the relationship continue to evolve and grow. I would also like to thank Casco Bay Principal Derek Pierce and PATHS Director Kevin Stilfen for their seriousness and wisdom addressing all aspects of this event. I always say that I'm humbled to work with the Portland Public Schools administrative team, and no time makes that more evident than in those times of crisis. From handling the first reports to providing appropriate and timely information to investigators first and to families and students later, they exemplified calm and proactive leadership. I also want to recognize the students who brought the threat to the attention of adults. As you've walked around our schools this fall, you may have noticed signs that encourage our students to say something if they see something. That is exactly what happened in that situation, and it was absolutely critical to the resolution of the matter. I would like to take the opportunity to remind parents and students of the risks associated with social media. It is important to realize that everything that is done on social media leaves a wake, and that whether in a case of a criminal activity such as this or as a reference for future employers or friends, thinking before posting is a must. We recognize as a district our important role in teaching digital citizenship to our students, and we absolutely encourage parents as their first teachers to reinforce those messages for their children. Thursday will be the 108th renewal of the Deering High School Portland High School football rivalry, the Turkey Bowl. The game kicks off at 10:30 a.m. at Fitzpatrick Stadium, and I hope there will be many students, families, and alums at the game.
You renamed the Turkey Bowl.
I did. I just called it the Turkey Bowl. Finally, I would like to wish all of our board members, staff, students, and families a happy Thanksgiving holiday and Turkey Bowl. School is out today and resumes on Monday, weather permitting. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Superintendent. Next, for the report of the Secretary, consideration and action to approve the minutes of the meeting of November 12, 2019. Is there a motion? Ms. Bondo, second by Mr. Atkinson. Are there any questions on the motion? Seeing none, is there any public comment on the motion? And seeing none, any board discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor of approving the minutes of the meeting of November 12, 2019, please indicate. And that's unanimous with the students voting with the majority. Next.
Consent.
Yeah, well, we have the report of the committees.
Oh.
Yeah. Next, for the report of the committees, consideration and action to, oh, excuse me. Let me get it from here. I'm sorry, so report of the committees, we're doing the end of the year committee reports. So the superintendent want to set us up for this?
Yeah, so at every committee chair's station, there is a report that we would ask you to just sort of go over for the rest of the board. The entire packet of reports is included in the board docs agenda. It's at the very end under other items, so anybody who wants to follow along that report, you can find it there. But with that, if you just want to call the committees and ask them to review it, that would be great.
Absolutely. So we'll start with the Curriculum and Ed Planning Committee. Mr. Balfons, you have the floor.
Thank you. So members Bondo, Morioni, and I were on the Curriculum Committee this year, along with Assistant Superintendent Nally staffing the committee. First, I'll start off by explaining the role of the committee. The Curriculum and Educational Planning Committee regularly reviews the district's practices related to the development, implementation, and evaluation of curriculum policies, models of learning, and educational instruction. It reviews and recommends policies that promote the sharing of best practices in curriculum, assessment, and instruction across the district. It regularly reviews state actions to ensure that the district's current practices comply with the state statutes, and it makes recommendations to the Finance Committee and the full board about how resources can best be allocated across the district to ensure equitable access to curriculum resources in accordance with the district's vision. Next, I'm going to review the activities and accomplishments ongoing work that happened in 2019. First, the year began with the PreK scale-up strategy. We hosted a series of workshops to review the strategies for scaling up pre. We reviewed pathway options and associated financials. We explored shifting pre-K program under the Opportunity Alliance and Head Start, looking at the pros, cons, and implications of each. We also made a recommendation to the full board. Next, we also had curricular updates and discussion. The updates, received updates on the immersion program, elementary math curriculum, which talked about the illustrative math. We also received updates on the elementary phonics program, which is the Lively Letters and Teachers College Phonics. We received updates on social studies. We reviewed a scan of current curriculum across all grade levels, reviewed the development of Wabanaki studies and K through 12. We also reviewed science, technology, and engineering. We reviewed a scan of current practice at the elementary level, a discussion of pedagogical shifts, reviewed the Riverton pilot around science units. We also looked at the behavioral health and social learning updates, and we also reviewed, we reviewed high school discipline data, which included disaggregation of data and exploration of disproportionality, and recommendation on communication to the public. We also held a question and answer on the behavioral health continuum following the full board update. Also during the year, we looked at the teaching and learning budget. We discussed federal grant plans and allocations for 2019 to 2020, and we also looked at 2021, the Portland Promise investment priorities. Looking at the policy work of the committee, we revised the policy IKF, which is the graduation requirements. We also revised policy IHBEA, which is the programs for students with limited English proficiency. Finally, we'll look at the priorities for 2020, starting with the policy work. The committee will initiate the development of a district equity policy to guide our long-term efforts to address systemic opportunity gaps. We'll also look to be in alignment with the BAR action plan, review and revise attendance and truancy-related policies as needed and determined through the larger secondary attendance action plan. We'll also review and revise policies related to the school libraries with a focus on enhancing policy according to current best practices around students' intellectual freedoms, access to databases, and parents' rights to guide their child's reading without infringing on the rights of other students. And finally, under the policy work for 2020, we'll look at the final technical revision to policy IKF, which is the graduation requirements to account for all 4 classes graduating with the expectation to pass standards. Finally, we'll also in 2020 have discussions and updates on district-wide vertical content teams, which includes teams on health with a focus on sex education, consent, and body safety. Another team with English language arts, ELA, focus on a progression of text with an emphasis on a coherent progression and cultural responsiveness. A vertical content team with math, exploration of D-tracking, pre-K through 12th grade. Another vertical team for science, technology, and engineering with a focus on the science vision, elementary science units integrated with ELA standards. And then finally, we'll also look at vertical content team for social studies with a focus on design and launch of Wabanaki studies. Including the discussion updates, we'll also look at the behavioral health continuum, the BREATHE program, the PreK scale-up, and also special education staffing. And that concludes my report for this year.
Thank you, Mr. Boffins. That's an impressive amount of work that the curriculum committee completed this year, and heavy lifting. So thank you for chairing that committee. Great job. Next, operations committee, Ms. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The operations committee consisted of myself, Emily Figdor, and Lori Davis, and Javier, our superintendent, as well as staff. We had regular updates from food service and transportation. We also developed and submitted recommendations for the 2021 capital improvement request from City Council. We reviewed and approved submission of recommended revolving loan fund applications to the Maine Department of Education. We worked with stakeholders to review the district's sustainability policy and reinforce implementation of the cost-saving programs that were developed as part of that policy. We worked with community stakeholders to sponsor the resolution to have Portland Public Schools participate in the large-scale solar project with City of Portland and other jurisdictions that can potentially reduce the school district's carbon footprint by 70%. Continuing to review a staff proposed transition of transportation purchases away from capital improvement fund to general fund, and we began exploration of changing school start times. We have a few priorities for 2020, which is the continuation of exploration of school start time changes, oversee direction on transportation for pre-kindergarten expansion, preparation and development of the CIP 2022, hard to believe, and monitor the sustainability policy implementation. And we met the first Thursday of each month. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Next, we'll do Finance and Personnel. Ms. Trevor.
Thank you, Chair. The Finance Committee this year was made up of members Lori Davis, Emily Figdor, and Tim Atkinson, and myself. We were staffed by our Finance Director, who at the beginning of the year was Alicia Gardner, and now we were joined halfway through the year by Miranda Fasulo. The role of the committee is to be responsible for conducting workshops and hearings on the school budget, recommending the budget to the full and City Council, overseeing the school department's budget and financial status throughout the year, reviewing and recommending to the board salaries, benefits, and policies for non-represented employees, developing personnel policies for review and recommendations to the board for approval, and designing and implementing the superintendent's evaluation process in conjunction with the board chair. Our activities and accomplishments for 2019 were reviewing Portland's revaluation project. We reviewed the National School Lunch Program, community eligibility provision. We reviewed, revised, and recommended the superintendent's FY 2020 budget, which included discussing the FY 2020 budget priorities, developing the budget timeline, reviewing investments, holding joint finance committee meetings, holding public hearings, recommending the budget, reviewing possible reductions, and conducting budget process debrief. We reviewed the FY 2019 financials. We held discussions with state legislators to review state funding outlook, potential legislative priorities. We reviewed the impact of legislative scenarios on our funding outlook. And we began planning for FY 21, including reviewing a draft budget calendar, beginning planning for city collaboration around the budget process, and discussing preliminary strategy around FY 21 investments and cost savings. And the priorities for 2020 are to continue the dialogue with Portland's legislative delegation to inform and enhance advocacy at the state level, effectively communicate the challenges of the FY 21 budget context to the Portland community and other constituencies, collaborate with City Council and city staff, unified vision for the FY 21 budget process, continue development of a strategy and framework for evaluating and prioritizing budget initiatives and cost-saving measures, reviewing and making recommendations to the full board on the superintendent's FY 2021 budget, and monitoring FY 2020 year-to-date financials throughout the fiscal year. Concludes my report.
Thank you, Ms. Trevor. Next, Policy and Legislative Affairs, Ms. Davis.
Thank you, Chair. The Policy and Legislative Affairs Committee was made up of myself as chair, Emily Figdor, and Tim Atkinson, and was staffed by our superintendent. This committee regularly reviewed board policies, developed new policies as needed, and recommended them to the board for approval. It also keeps current on relevant legislative issues, develops resolutions, and reports regularly to the board. This past Here, we reviewed and updated policy books A, which are the foundations and basic commitments, and book B, board governance and operations. We completed all non-substantive changes and some minor substantive changes to book A and book B. We revised book C with non-substantive policy changes, pending the approval of the policies that are on our agenda a little later on in tonight's meeting. And we revised policy JLF, Child Abuse Reporting, Prevention, and Education. We also did an additional revision of policy AC, non-discrimination, equal opportunity, and affirmative action, and policy ACAD, hazing, to comply with new 2019 statutory changes. We had the adoption of policy JBEEA, which is social media by staff, and revisions to the superintendent evaluation process and the tools that we use. We also actively participated in the city legislative committee and included testifying on the local option sales tax proposals, having a much stronger role with both the city's lobbyist and reviewing the various proposals that were before the legislature that impacted us in terms of educational policy and law. We requested an equity-focused review of district student-facing policies from the Center for Educational Equity, and that is mostly complete, and so it will be part of the work for next year. We also established a subcommittee to review policy ACAA and ACAA-R while developing a Title IX plan, and that's the outcome of the testimony that we heard from the public a few weeks ago about our Title IX programming. Priorities for 2020. The goals of the Legislative Policy and Legislative Committee are to continue book-by-book policy updating in cooperation with Drummond Woodsum. It's a little bit dry work, but it's important because it really is the basis of our work. And we're getting through them one policy at a time. We're going to incorporate the Center for Educational Equity focused policy review into the policies as appropriate. And this will help us to meet the equity goal of the Portland Promise a little more strongly than in our policies as well. Let's see. We will continue the active participation on the City of Portland Legislative Committee activities, work with the subcommittee content area experts and stakeholders to develop the Title IX plan modeled after best practice plans from other jurisdictions, and that will impact the policies ACAA and ACAA-R. We also are planning on substantive revisions to the following policies: sexual harassment, tobacco and vaping, tobacco use and possession, tobacco use and possession administrative procedure, and the whole area of administration of medication with regard to medicinal marijuana. And lastly, a development of a school resource officer policy and administrative procedures, including changes, modifications to the district's memorandum of understanding with the Portland Police Department. So a busy year this past year, and a substantive agenda for the board for next year.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Next, for Public Affairs Committee, Mr. Atkinson, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. So the Public Affairs Committee this year was Member Morioni, Member Bondo, and myself. So I'll read the description here of the Public Affairs Committee. So our purpose was to build community engagement and connection to board work by facilitating opportunities for the community and board members to listen, take feedback from, and connect with the community. The committee works to build awareness in the community, to explain opportunities to interact with the board. And here it says that the Public Affairs Committee meets on a needed basis. I don't know if we decided that we needed to meet every month, but we met every month. The committee's purpose is to conduct outreach meetings throughout the year. So we had a really good time on the committee this year. It was a fun group, and I think we sort of took that fun and casual nature of our committee work and to bring that into the work that we did with the community as well. So that mostly took form with the Coffee with Constituents effort, a bunch of meetings that we had at coffee shops in the morning that were just open for community members to come in and have a coffee and talk with us about what they were passionate about. And I'd really appreciate, I think almost all of the board members were able to attend at least one of those meetings, and I think they were just a really valuable time to kind of go deep with constituents on work. So I'm very happy with that, and one of the priorities for 2020 is to expand that to include some time, similar sort of open-ended time to meet with teachers and also with students, particularly high school students. And so a couple of the other things that we did this last year, we held a public forum on the budget again, which I think is a really important practice. And again, that's one we're continuing or planning to continue for 2020. And we also did a pilot of Facebook Live for our meetings, and you can see the computer that Grace set up back there. That's the high-tech solution that we've got going here. But I think it works, and it helps to bring in more of the community into meetings. So that's really our goal. A couple of other things that are on the horizon for 2020. We've been doing quite a bit of work talking about public schools ambassadors and how we can engage with community members on a deeper level, maybe give them some training and get them out in the community spreading our mission and our values and explaining to folks why Portland Public Schools is the amazing and special place that a similar, that's a common theme throughout all of this. We're really trying to get the Portland Promise and those values and our mission out into the community. So we're working on a breakfast with realtors, and I say we. Grace does almost all of our work. I don't know where she is right now, but
She's on vacation.
She's on vacation. Okay. Well, thank you, Grace, on vacation. I hope it's relaxing. She works so hard for us, and so she's been putting together this breakfast with realtors to get those really influential community members, up to speed again with the promise and what we're trying to accomplish. So I thought it was a really wonderful year, and look forward to more of the same next year.
Thank you, Mr. Atkinson. Are there any other committee and/or member concerns? Oh, appointments committee. Sorry, Ms. Morioni, you have the floor.
Thank you. So the Appointments Committee is fairly new. We've had it for the last few years at least, but the role of the committee is the Appointments Committee recommends candidates to serve on special committees or citizen advisory boards when directed to do so through a resolution passed by the board. The committee will submits lists of candidates to the board for approval, and the special committees task force are generally established short-term goals and are automatically disbanded once such as have been reached and the recommendations are received by the board. So our activities, accomplishments, and ongoing work for 2019 were as follows. We revised policy BCF and policy BCF-R, which is the actual policy around the Appointments Committee, and it reflects the board's direction in engaging community members in committees. We issued a recruitment survey for community members to apply to serve on the board committees. And then we also worked really very hard to incorporate and include and recruit our elected officials, the city councilors, to serve as appointees along with us on our building level advisory committees, not only our district level advisory committee, but also the advisory committees for Longfellow, Presumpscot, and Reiki elementary schools for their renovation projects, the bond that was approved. We also have put forward an application and continue to have an application open at the moment for Presumpscot and Longfellow. It will close on December 1st, and that is to, again, bring forward and recommend candidates for the Longfellow, Presumpscot, and Reiki building committees. We also did recommend a candidate to fill a vacant district building advisory committee opening this past year. So our priorities for 2020, continue to recruit, vet, and recommend members for board-created special committees, task forces, et cetera. Complete the appointments to the building-level advisory committees for Longfellow, Presumpscot, and Reike Elementary School renovation projects. Recommend an appointment to replace outgoing board member Laurie Davis on the District Building Advisory Committee, and assist the full board with any advisory committee membership work that's directed by the board. I also, initially should have said that on that committee, myself as chair, Nikki Bondo, Sarah Thompson, Anna Trevorrow, and with Superintendent Botana did this work this past year. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Morioni. Now we'll get other committees and/or member concerns. Ms. Thompson, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The District Advisory, District Advisory Building Committee met on November 21st here, at the district offices. We had a great meeting and lots of updates from Harriman, which is our architect. One of the items that we discussed was a construction management update. We also reviewed the community forums that were held for Longfellow, Presumpscot, and Reike, and the stakeholder engagement that they had with staff and school administration at each of the schools. We they told us about the design statements that happened at each of the community forums. Just wanted to read those because there was a lot of work that went into them from a lot of people at those community forums, and they're kind of cool, the design statements they came up with. But for Longfellow Elementary, the design statement is nurturing the roots of community to grow the hearts and minds of learners for a dynamic world. At Reike Elementary, the design statement is to create an inclusive environment that celebrates diversity, fosters collaboration, embraces nature, and integrates into the urban fabric. And last but not least, Presumpscot, the design statement was a welcoming, diverse family, creating safe spaces for learners to collaborate, grow, and explore. And it was interesting to review the staff comments, the survey comments, because a lot of the identified issues across the board for all three schools were very similar. There were a few items, for instance, Reike is the only one that doesn't have walls. And so that was differed. But for the most part, a lot of them talked about separate cafeteria and gyms and access to natural light, ADA accessibility, and so on and so forth. We talked about potential construction budgets, but that's still being formed as well. And there'll be further coming up in January that we will have some complete concepts available. We'll have public forums coming up in February, individual by each school. February through May will be the complete design development, and then as we progress, May through June permitting, and another public forum, and we're looking to put it out for bid in November of 2020 and construction of 2021 in January. So we're moving right along, and I think we've come a long way thanks to the efforts of a lot of people, and one of our board members worked very hard on this over the last few years. And yeah, it's very exciting to see it all finally come to fruition. We also, as Ms. Morioni said, that we briefly discussed the BLACs. We still have some openings available, so hopefully people will apply at Longfellow and Presumpscot. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Do we have any other committees and/or member concerns? Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent items. Will the superintendent please read the list of donations made to the school district?
Yes, Mr. Chair, under Board Policy KCD, the school board accepts by unanimous consent contributions made to the school district as required by that policy. All the donations are listed in the board agenda under this item, and our practice is for each to receive a written contribution acknowledgement expressing our heartfelt gratitude as well as for their tax purposes. I would like to thank the many generous contributors to the Portland Public Schools who have made donations of durable goods, goods of substantial value and historical or commemorative significance, and the beneficiaries and contributors are for Reike Elementary School. They received a donation to support Peace Place, an alternative activity, outdoor recess from Norway Savings Bank of Norway, Maine. Reike Elementary School also received 15 copies of the Maine Birthday Book from Thomas Steiberg of Scarborough. Riverton Elementary School received non-perishable foods, boots, hats, mittens, and gloves for students as needed from Steve and Don DeBias of Portland, and Riverton Elementary School also received gift cards for the Bridge program for their cooking class from Hannaford of Portland, and Ocean Avenue Elementary School received the following donations: 5 gift cards for Catch a Wave Recognition Prize from Rosemont Market and Bakery of Portland, 6 gift cards also for the Catch a Wave Recognition Prize from Hannaford Supermarkets of Portland, gift cards also for the Catch a Wave Recognition Prizes from Amato's of Portland, and a cash donation from Paul Kim of Scarborough, Maine. And so we're very grateful to all of those contributors for their generous support and contributions to the work of the Portland Public Schools.
Thank you, Superintendent. Next, we're going to have a board focus on educational issues. We're going to have an update on the pre-kindergarten expansion. Superintendent, you want to set us up?
Sure. Tonight, Assistant Superintendent Malia Nally and PreK Director Suzanne Chevalier will update you on the scale-up pre-K programs this year. As you know, last year we proposed and you approved a 4-year plan to scale up our pre-K programming. That scale-up included adding 2 classrooms this year and another 2 each of the next couple of years. As part of that scale-up, we were able to appoint our first ever Director of Pre-K Education, yay, whom you will hear from tonight. And additionally, we were charged with incorporating staff from our partnership sites into the district collective bargaining agreement, and also exploring transportation and before and after school care programming. And so that obviously has been a tremendous amount of work. We are today wanting to give you an update on where we are in this very exciting and challenging implementation. I'm going to turn it over to Assistant Superintendent Nally to introduce tonight's update on our pre-K implementation.
Great, thank you. Hello, everyone. Sue's here with me. Hi. And we're just going to kind of co-present this together. And you should have this at your desk, and we provided an outline of everything we were going to cover per your feedback at the last implementation update. So hopefully you guys receive that in your board book. And quickly before we jump into this, I just wanted to make sure from an expectation setting perspective that you all know this is, early implementation update. So this is not after action review, kind of an evaluation of what happened at the end of the year, which is probably a conversation we'll have then. We're just trying to be really transparent with you guys and give you as we go. So there's all this information is works in progress, and so we're excited to answer the questions that we can, but a lot of it's work that is midstream and we're still figuring out as we go. So with that being said, you all know that this is one of the strategies that we are very focused on in relationship to our equity goal, and specifically it also kind of is the foundation for all of our Portland Promise goals, achievement and whole student as well. We won't talk much about the research tonight because we did spend quite a bit of time thinking about the research on the impact and importance of quality pre-K throughout last year as we came to the conclusion and decision to scale it up over the next 5 years. But I did just want to reiterate again that there's really clear research and data that shows it has a big impact, especially for students who are from low-income backgrounds, which is why we situated this as one of our key equity strategies. This is a reminder of what we have been trying to accomplish this year. So there's the resolution on the one side. So these are the key kind of commitments that you all voted on over the next 5 years. So this is where we agreed in the resolution to expand by at least 140 seats, before and after care transportation, move all teachers and ed techs onto our contract, et cetera. And so this year, these are the things we committed to from an implementation perspective in year 1. So first, hiring our pre-K director, opening 2 new classrooms, which brought in 32 new seats this year. Bringing the teachers onto the contract. There was a lot of conversation at the time of the resolution about, whether or not we needed a hard timeline on that. We backed off that hard timeline and said would work to do that over the course of the year. We were to initiate before and after care planning. We had a goal of trying to see if we could make an offering by January. Planning out transportation strategy, so knowing we wouldn't offer it this year, but working on a plan for the long-term strategy. And then continuing to lay the foundation for strong program components into the future. So tonight, for each of those pieces of our annual action plan, we're going to give you an update on progress and a kind of sense of what our next moves will be. So progress today, we hired our PreK Director. So we are truly thrilled. We've introduced Sue before. We have one full-time person focused on this program. Sue's job, as many people have told me when they read the job description, is the job of about 10. So Sue works on strategy, operations, partnerships, curriculum, hiring, coaching, evaluation, etc. But it's been incredible to have Sue, and these are some of the highlights of her background. But one is just having dedicated capacity focused on this is huge. And then secondly, Sue just brings the most perfect combination of background and skills in terms of early childhood education, English language learning, special education, coaching, teaching. She really is the full package. So we're thrilled that she's here. And so secondly, we wanted to give an update on expansion. So Sue, I think you're going to do that one.
That will be me. So part of our plan for year one was to expand by 2 classrooms, which we have done, one at Rowe School and one at East End. So there are 2 each in those schools, which is lovely for those pre-K teachers to have teaching partners now. We are completely fully enrolled across the district in all our pre-K offerings at 159 seats, which is so lovely. We do also have a waiting list, which we'll talk about a little bit in a little bit. We did incur some unanticipated costs were upfronted to us as we lengthened school day, for example. After you have 5 hours of program, you're required to provide rest or nap for students, so that meant that we needed to provide rest mats for many more students than we anticipated, because we didn't plan in the expansion those classrooms also needing furniture. For the 2 classrooms that we did open, we had to furnish with 4-year-old size furniture, which was, again, quite a undertaking and expense, but what is developmentally appropriate. So those are just some small examples. Our next move is in expansion. As of our October count, we have 76% of our currently enrolled kindergarten students had attended pre-K. And right now, our pre-K waitlist is 4 students, 38% of which are low-income students. And we know from prior experience and from data this year that the neighborhoods in which there are the fewest takers of pre-K experience were Reiki, East End, and Riverton. That was 2 years ago, and then Riverton and Presumpscot. So the neighborhoods that we're looking to potentially to add slots for future, what we need to do in order to do that is determine whether there's viable space in our buildings, and if not, there are viable community partners, or both simultaneously, to determine which is the best expansion strategy. Part of that includes a cost analysis, what it costs us in our building versus our community sites.
Great. I think I'm up next. And then in terms of transitioning our community partner teachers and ed techs onto the PEA contract, this has played out differently with all 3 of our community partners. So YFO, Youth and Family Outreach, has moved on to the contract. And so we've been working on some of the details of the Memorandum of Understanding, trying to figure out the impact on cost, because there's still a cost there for using their building space, materials, so there are some interesting things that came up in that work with them. But by and large, that's partnership is intact. We've hired a new teacher there, and Sue did that with the director of the program, and so we're moving forward there. In terms of Catherine Morrill, so this is the community partner that supported the class here in the Paths building, and we are no longer partnering with them on the public pre-K program. There just wasn't anything there when it's not their space, and then they are no longer supervising the teacher architect formally, so there wasn't anything in terms of the public pre-K to keep that partnership intact, which we were disappointed by because they're an amazing partner, an amazing director of that program, a huge resource. And so they continue to work with the program here at PATHS, the CTE Early Education Program, EVA's class for students that are interested in that. We hope to be able to do some partnership with them in the future, but the impact of the contract meant that that partnership did dissolve this year. And then thirdly is the Opportunity Alliance, so TOA, and that partnership is in flux at this point, and really that is connected to the stipulation you all have that all community partners need to move on to the contract. That's not something that they're able to do or willing to do. They would love to partner with us into the future. We believe they're just a critical partnership for our students, given the services that Head Start is able to offer families. And so we do really hope that we can figure something out. But they have not moved to the contract. They don't intend to do that. And so, again, we consider that partnership kind of in flux at this point, and we are working in collaboration with them to figure out how we should proceed. And so in terms of next moves, we're just continuing to unpack the implications of the move to the contract. And this goes from the small details that we would never have thought of to the really big stuff. So a small example is snow days. Our teachers don't come in on the snow day. First of all, how do we establish that expectation because our community sites stay open? How do we communicate to them through our system? Because we have all of our robocalls set up, like a whole host of things that are really in the weeds, but are part of what we keep discovering, where the complexity of this is significant, to the bigger stuff around supervision and evaluation and how that works as a collaboration with the director of the programs. In terms of paths, also just trying to continue figuring out how do we do supervision here. So some of you who've been on the board for a long time know that the program here at PATHS was initiated prior to public pre-K. It was really for the CTE program. It evolved into one of our public pre-K locations. But now that we've pulled the partner out of it, there's just complexity there. When we need subs, is that Sue? How do we figure that out? Because we don't have a building administrator, sort of either a director you'd have and a community partner or a principal, the way we do in every other program. So that's been complicated. The other kind of big focus next moves is around professional development. So trying to figure out and coordinate with all of our different sites how to do this in a meaningful way and how to make sure people are getting access to PD. So we do monthly PD for the pre-K folks, and they come together, but we have an expectation that all of our early elementary educators get certain professional development for equity PDs. So how are we working to figure out where folks go, how they get access to that? And then, like I mentioned, another big next move is continuing to sort out the partnership we hope to have with the Opportunity Alliance and Head Start into the future.
Okay. So progress to date on before and after care options. First off, we've lengthened the day in several of our buildings to come closer to the regular school day. So we have provided some extended opportunity from last year. We also surveyed the pre-K families regarding their interest, looking towards the potential for launching something in January. We had, as you see there in the bullet points, a very good response rate, multilingual help by doing individual calls to families that needed interpreters, which was great. And you see that there's a range of interest there. 23% of all people surveyed interested in before school and 28% interested in after school. I have been exploring multiple pathways for partnering with community programs and existing programs to see how we can afford pre-K either before and or after school. It is very complex, including staffing concerns, developmentally appropriateness concerns, issues of licensing, issues of the financials and how the financials are coming if we were to do a sliding scale. So very big, complex project. I'm learning a lot. We are very fortunate and moving forward potentially for January with a pilot site at Rowe Elementary School to provide aftercare in collaboration with LearningWorks. They're a very avid, eager partner, very responsive to having the aftercare program be a continuous experience for pre-K students, which is critically important to me to make sure it's developmentally appropriate and high quality, but also just fun and engaging for 4-year-olds. It's a special time, I think, and it's not any old after-school opportunity. So that is our hope. We are in process right now with the state, Department of Education and Department of Health and Human Services around the licensing requirements. We have not communicated to families yet because we are awaiting that approval before we can absolutely move forward. That being said, I have been meeting regularly with LearningWorks around the planning. Yes, and we're excited for the opportunity, if not for now, then potentially for the future. So next moves, continue with LearningWorks to flesh out the pilot once we get a good, ideally from the state, and then really critically look at the pilot and what's working, the cost, is it something that's scalable, and then building out our financial model moving forward. We're also committed to exploring or revisiting other pathways for the fall because I think we have to consider just more than LearningWorks if LearningWorks doesn't have the capacity to meet our need. We're not there yet in terms of having made that decision. So the consideration I want to just emphasize is that if we continue to expand in community sites that already are equipped to offer before and after care, that solves a problem in some ways for us, or meets a need, I should say, for the wraparound care. So that's a consideration in our expansion for next year.
Okay, and then transportation, this is progress and next moves, really the focus this year, like I mentioned, on planning. And so we're looking at things like the readiness of being able to transport pre-K students. So I think we've talked about this in the past. There are unique requirements for students for the age 4, so we have to retrofit and or purchase buses that have, they call them the safety harnesses, with which Sue and I both seems, I don't know, weird, but harnesses. We also need to figure out how we would hire and supervise bus aides, because they need to have a bus aide on the bus if you have the 4-year-old. So lots of additional things to consider. You're transporting 4-year-olds, so we're working in collaboration with Eric on that, our transportation director. Another piece of the planning work here is around the routes. So it's not as as just, adding pre-K students to the routes once we have the safety belts and the aids, because a bunch of our students don't go to their neighborhood school. So, if you're a student at Lyseth or Longfellow, all of a sudden it's a whole new set of routes we're trying to figure out. So given all of that, there's all sorts of cost implications, and so Eric's done some awesome work in the midst of a series of meetings to look at both the cost, but also the kind of programmatic impact of the options that we might have, because we could know how much it would cost, but then what does it mean for the timing of other routes and other after-school programs. And so far, I know that there are impacts, and so that's the conversation that we're having.
So in terms of early intervention, special education services in collaboration with child development services, our MOU with CDS indicates that we should be striving for the same percentage of identified students as we do have in the rest of the Portland Public Schools. Right now, our identified special ed pre-K students is at 11%, although it's early in the year and typically it takes a little while to identify and really be critically thoughtful about ruling out what is potentially a language issue or an exposure issue versus a potential disability. So we're being really careful around that. And we've initiated a new collaboration with CDS wherein we can hire and as one-to-one ed techs for students who have higher needs. And that has really resulted in us getting better support more quickly for those students than we have in the past years. So we're very excited about that. It also does impact supervision of staff, hiring of staff, and so impacted time for both me and for special education administrators. So I talked a little bit about special ed. This is around serving our dual language learners. We, as Portland Public Schools, made a commitment to 1.5 FTE, so 1.5 people specifically dedicated to working with our dual language learners. I hired 2 amazing people, one who was a veteran Portland Public Schools person, and another who was from outside the district but is bilingual, had amazing pre-K and ELL experience, and sadly, she relocated and resigned. And it's been very difficult to replace her because there is a required endorsement, that's the 660 ELL endorsement, which is a K-12 endorsement. So to find someone that has teaching experience, really pre-K, ideally experience, coaching experience, and that endorsement has not been easy. So we've been working with HR, doing a lot of outreach to try and replace that position, but it's been open for a while, which is unfortunate. So next moves, progress and next moves around curriculum and evaluation. I'm thrilled that all 11 pre-K classrooms are using consistent curriculum and screening and assessment tools across the district. So we're using Opening the World of Learning for our core curriculum, along with Everyday Math and some modifications, working with Tracy Zager. Second Step for social emotional curriculum, and Teaching Strategies Gold for our assessment system. It was already mentioned earlier this evening that pre-K has been added to the vertical content teams, which is great to have representation pre-K through 12 now. I have also been running monthly professional development sessions for the pre-K team, including the ed techs, and in terms of trying to build our collective efficacy, identifying individual staff members who have a particular expertise that the team has go-tos other than me, because I'm one person with 22 people working with me. So it's really wonderful to have some of our pre-K teachers to teacher leadership roles. Future moves include trying to get some baseline data on what the quality of both interactions and environments are in the classroom. I'd like to use the class tool, which is what the state uses to monitor our programs, and also look towards the possibility of doing universal pre-K and K screenings to be collaborative and more consistent across pre-K and kindergarten screening.
Great. So some of the kind of important considerations as we move forward. First, our application for the pre-K lottery is expected to go live in January 2nd. And we're just cognizant of the unknowns pending budget. So that's just something to raise up to your awareness, that we assume we can't make a firm commitment on before and after care, transportation. And so for families, it's just trying to say, here are the offerings. There may or may not be before and after care. There may or may not be transportation. And so we're trying to write things to be clear for families so they understand what they can and can't expect. But that's just, something we've been working on and grappling with. Secondly, just a note that expansion classrooms will likely be in community partner sites. We're working with Assistant Superintendent Townsend on locations and space in the building, but we know that it's unlikely we would have space this next year before the kind of work's done on the schools that are getting renovated. And so if we're expanding into community partner sites, that requires even more backward planning than if we were to do it in our own classrooms, because that, we have to figure out the nature of the partnership. That partner would have to feel confident that they could commit to saving those seats for our students. So, they run a business, so they're not going to want to just hold seats for us until the spring. So that's something that we'll have to be talking about ongoing if we're going to be set up for implementation. And then finally, there's the revenue task force, which I know is always a key. We always assume that we would need more than our operating budget to achieve what's set forth in the resolution. So I think, were you, Superintendent, going to talk a little bit about that?
Speak to it very quickly. So Board Member Figdor serves on the Revenue Task Force. As you'll recall, that's a group of people representing different constituencies and backgrounds across the city. That I'm co-chairing with Mike Bork, the CEO of MEMIC. We've met, I think, 3 or 4 times, and it's actually being staffed by Katie Katie Camplin, Susie, sorry, from Connect Ed, and we've worked with the task force to look at all of the work that has been done across the country around different ways in which communities are able to fund their pre-kindergarten expansion, their early childhood programming in general. And I think we've made significant progress, particularly at this last meeting where we had a comprehensive review of all of those different options and began to prioritize what are the things that we think are possible context, but there's going to be significant work even after those recommendations come out to then be able to build the political will to move those forward. So I actually don't expect it for this budget cycle. We're going to have a workable resolution, so that expansion for next year is going to have to be part of our budget, but still continuing to work for a comprehensive solution that looks at the entire early childhood continuum, so from birth to kindergarten in a more comprehensive community-based way. But that work is happening, and I, again, don't think that we will have a specific resolution for this budget cycle.
Great. So I think before we wrap up with some questions, that I'm not going to read these fully. I underlined a few things to call out, but Sue had collected some comments, like emails that come in from parents without being prompted, notes from teachers, things like that. And we've heard a ton of positive feedback about the actual student experience in the classroom, so we're just really thrilled about that. Hear this one. Talk about a sudden skyrocketing gain in self-recognition and confidence. Words can't express how beyond grateful I am that my son has the opportunity to explore his developmental mind and future through the offer of pre-K. And again, this other one talks about couldn't be happier. To me, this is the model for elementary school education. It's clear that my son loves his classroom and teachers. Since he has started, he has never complained about going to school, which is a first. So it feels like a ton of really complex planning behind the scenes to sort of figure out how to pull this off. But when you get in the classroom and you're with the students and the teachers, there's awesome stuff happening. And I think our students and parents are really happy and pleased with what's going on in our pre-K program. So we are happy, I think, to take questions, or does that work?
Yeah, I think we can probably ask a few questions. I think if there's any questions that have a more substantive answer, maybe we can queue it up to be something we can share with the board at another time at a committee meeting. But certainly, I'm sure some board members might have some things they want to queue up. Any questions? Victor?
I had a comment. Just first, on the slide that outlined the key points in the resolution, I just wanted to add one that wasn't included, which was that we come back as a board and evaluate our ramp up of pre-K and whether we're going to attain truly universal pre-K. And I understand the extent of or I'm getting a sense of the extent of the complexities, and that the work you're doing now is critical to us being able to move forward with what we've planned so far, the additional classrooms. But I'm also cognizant on what the need is, and that all of our kids in Portland, all of our 4-year-olds and really 3-year-olds need high-quality early childhood education. So just wanted to bring us to that commitment that we made to come back and evaluate whether or not we're going to actually strive for and have a plan to get to truly universal pre-K. And then I had a question about the wait list. You said that there are 78 kids on the wait list, and is that bigger than in the past? It seems like, based on...
To be honest, I don't know. But I don't think it's bigger than in the past. It's I've been told, quite unusual that we're completely full at this time.
It is, not even just told, it is true that I mean, since I've been here, we haven't by this point in the year been fully enrolled at this stage. So that's a huge win. But yes, the wait list is typical.
And I mean, I have the disaggregated data not in my head, but if you'd like it, around where the wait list is and what demographics, because I think that also is helpful for us in our planning moving forward.
Yeah, and I'll just bring...
I guess I'm not completely grasping the between, it's terrific that the program is completely full now, but the how the wait list and capacity dovetail. So in the past, when there's been openings, we just haven't been able to find, and we have a wait list, we just haven't been able to necessarily hook up individual kids with the openings. Is that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and
Okay.
I mean, part of the whole sort of beginning of this process was recognizing that that was happening and kind of wondering and noticing that it was families from low-income backgrounds in particular that weren't taking or were dropping out of slot. And so that's where we were scratching our head and saying, okay, the path we're on doesn't seem to necessarily be working for all of our families, so let's pause and more deeply understand why so that we have a scale-up strategy nuanced and responsive to the needs of the community. So that was part of what initiated our desire to get a more deep strategic plan for this.
So a family might be on the wait list if they're not able to take a spot they're offered. Is that?
No. Once you've been offered a slot and you've declined the slot, then you're not on the wait list.
Thank you.
Mr. Boffins.
Looking at the community partners, can you remind me what the partnership looked like between the Paths Pre-K and Portland schools?
So remind you what it looked like. So we had, so Catherine Morrill was the community partner, and so their director oversaw the program here. So she hired and supervised the teacher, and came in periodically for coaching and support. So whereas at Riverton, Ann Hanna, the principal there, would be the supervisor of the pre-K classrooms, or at one of these other partner sites, the director on site is the supervisor. In this case, it's the director from Catherine Morrill who oversaw that program.
Okay. So we just lose the supervising portion of that?
Yes, yeah, I mean, that was the main thing, because it wasn't, the other parts of the partnership weren't like space and, the supervision and, expertise in terms of the partnership, but yes. And this program, it does remain a little unique because there are 3 slots held for 3-year-olds because it's connected to the genesis of the program here, which is a part of the CTE program and requirements for that, so.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
Ms. Bondo, and then Ms. Davis.
I have a couple of questions, and I think just follow up what Mr. Bonfons just mentioned about the partnership with the partner, because we choose the path too because of the relationship we have with the community partners. Now I see with the Opportunity Alliances in Libya, so really kind of my questions was the future will look like. So are we thinking about different strategy just in case we don't come to the same conclusion? Because we really value our teachers to be on the PA contract because that's why we vote for it. So are we putting some plans, some strategy, just a plan B to make sure if it's not working, are we still reaching out to some new community partners to try to be on collaboration for that?
Yeah. I think that's what we're trying to do is identify, can we hone in on the neighborhoods where there's a greater need, and are there qualified community partner sites in those locations? And there are some that we know in the Riverton area that we're initiating conversations with. So yeah, that's part of that work, kind of long-term, is figuring out where are the other qualified providers in the community. If there aren't enough, how do we support them as a collaborative with Starting Strong and Getting Ready? So yes, that is definitely planning work that's happening. And then I think in terms of the Opportunity Alliance, I do think we hope that there's some way that some kind of relationship and partnership remains, given how, just taking it from a student-centered perspective, those Head Start offering for families is substantial in terms of what they can offer in other services that, we don't offer in the district. So that's, so we're trying to figure that out. But they have indicated that they're not going to have their teachers come onto the contract.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And I have 2 more sub-questions.
Yeah.
And we mentioned about Riverton, and I think Riverton East End, there were really low opportunity for those students, to reach out, to come to the pre-K. And now we have 1 teacher, DLL. Then I think we lost 1 teacher for the dual language learner. So how are we doing now with those students? What kind of help and what kind of support they do have right now?
Yep. The 1.5 DLL teacher positions were to cover the 11 classrooms, so the students within those classrooms.
Okay.
Some of the classrooms have many identified dual language learners, some have very few.
Okay.
So I had set the programming expectation with those two individuals based on where the needs were and what the level of needs were, because as you know, we have brand-new newcomers, and then we have
Exactly.
formed students, the needs are very different. So right now, in absence of that full-time person, I'm trying to fill the void a little bit because I have that expertise, but also we're trying to help the current half-time DLL teacher to get around to biggest needs, so that some classrooms are not just getting nothing, that we're trying to spread the wealth a little bit, but also to enlist the building ELL teachers to provide some consultation to those teachers.
And with EdTech also helping on the side?
Yes, and we do have some bilingual ed techs in our pre-K programs as well. It's not always the same language fit, but that certainly helps as well.
Okay. And I think we talk about transportation, and I remember when we were earlier the year, when we talk about maybe providing some Metro Pass, are we having those kind of requests when we did the enrollment?
Yes, families that we did a clear communication to families that if they needed a Metro Pass to reach out to us, and we do have families that are using the Metro.
So he's working
It is
on
not, yeah, it is a solution. It's not,
Yeah, but
it's
at least-
very cumbersome from a scheduling perspective for families
Right.
because it's 4 trips back and forth to
Exactly.
get children
But they
there.
do request, right?
They do
Yeah.
request it, and families are using them, yes.
Okay.
So it's a testament to how much they want their children to be in pre-K
Exactly.
programming.
Yes. And one more last question. And when you mentioned about Sue, and she's covering almost everything. I remember we had .5 administrator support. I think, did we already hire someone or not?
No, so when we planned that .5, at that point, it was intended to be largely for the before and after care part. So there was like a whole financial role that Alicia kept forecasting for us. So if we were going to start to run our own pre-K where we were taking fees on a sliding scale and having to collect fees from families and do all of that work, we knew that that was going to be a big chunk of work that the finance team did not have the capacity for. So we have been holding to try to figure out just generally between that and enrollment, those were the two big rocks. Where are things landing so that when we're designing the position, setting expectations, figuring out what's the skill set we need this person to have, that we're matching it to kind of the programmatic design. And as we talked about the before and after, because, Sue sort of mentioned there's been like 5 or 6 different pathways we've been exploring. And right now, we've just started to land on this learning work option, pending the state approval as a pilot.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Great job. Thank you.
So just real quick, just for the sake of timeliness, if we have questions, if we can just maybe note them down and maybe address them either via email or some other format, just so that we can, stick to the spirit of this being a quick update. Ms. Fig, go ahead. Actually, Ms. Davis, I'm sorry, I had you queued up.
Yeah, my question was just, with the expansion that you say you're likely in community partner sites, are you going to be able to bring those teachers on the contract? Is that part of the
that would be part
negotiations?
of the expectation for, so I think it's a little cleaner with the new partners, because we
Yeah.
just enter with that as sort of a baseline expectation.
Okay,
Yeah.
great, thank you.
Yeah.
Ms. Victor?
Just a quick thing with regards to the application going live and not prior to our budget process. I do just want to state from my own perspective that the full rollout of the expanded pre-K program, including with before and after care and transportation, I see as a key goal of the board, so that even in a tough budget year, we would do everything we can to see this through, and it would be a very high priority. So, of course, I'm just speaking on my own behalf, but we made a commitment to expand this program, and we know we need those components in order to do it right and in order to enable families to participate.
Thank you, Ms. Victor. Ms. Marioni?
This will be quick. First of all, thank you, Sue, for all your hard work. Since monumental, and the fact that we've moved along this quickly I really appreciate that. I very much appreciate it. I do, talking with my colleague, Ms. Thompson, I know you're doing this, but I just want to indicate it for the community as well. We are in renovations for 4 elementary schools. In those renovations, we have specified very least 1, possibly 2 pre-K rooms for each of those buildings. So as we talk about partnerships and all that, I just want to make sure we're in alignment with that, because I know those buildings are slated to be finished in 2022, 2023, although that seems like forever ago. It'll be here quickly, I think, too. So as long as, I'm sure thinking that along, because I would also hate for us to do tons of work to work with partners, and then we realize, okay, wow, now we have these classrooms and we can't, or something to that effect. So I just wanted to raise that as a thought in my mind around our building expansion. Thank you. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. So real quick, the only things that I want to queue up at some point, I would like maybe at the curriculum committee for us to have a quick rundown and explanation of the OWL curriculum and how it differentiates from other curriculums. As you know, I don't know about board members, but I've heard from parents sort of kind of differing ideas about what the OWL curriculum is and how it's implemented. So just to have clarification so that we can respond to those parents. And then also, I thought we'd be like fighting for that 0.5 position to help Sue out. Wow, what a massive amount of work that you guys have been doing. We're here to support you guys, and obviously we understand how challenging this all is. So great job, and thank you for the update.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. We don't have any old business. A new business, consideration and action to approve changes to policy JLF, child abuse reporting, child abuse reporting, prevention, and education. Is there a motion? Ms. Davis, second by Ms. Morioni. Will the superintendent please speak to the motion?
Yeah, but before I speak specifically to JLF, I just wanted to talk a little bit about, in general, about what we're trying to do tonight, because you have for you a number of policies up for revision, and these have been reviewed by the current policy committee under the leadership of outgoing board member Davis, and they've really taken on the revision and updating of our policies. And if all of these policies are approved tonight, as I think you heard board Committee Chair Davis speak to, both, so not both, books A, B, and C will all be reviewed during this term, which is a pretty significant undertaking. So one of the things that you'll notice is that we're asking you to forego the customary first read on these policies, and I just want to talk a little bit about the reasons for that. First is because these are relatively minor changes, as you will see as we walk through them. But secondly, as we end this cycle with the board, it seems probable that the current board, which has been involved in the policy revision process to date, finish this round of revisions, rather than wait for a new board to be seated, committee leadership restructured, committees convened, and policies reviewed and read twice by the incoming committee and then the board. So as I mentioned, all of these policies are undergoing relatively minor changes. You look, for example, policies AC and AD, which are, you know, the next two that we'll be taking on. Those were just revised last month, but no sooner did we complete those revisions that we were presented with additions to those policies that were brought on by recent changes in state law. And I think that underscores why it's important for us to do this policy revision work and keep going with it and dedicate the time and energy that we've dedicated this year under Ms. Davis's leadership to actually doing that. So before we actually begin with policy JLF, I wanted to pause and make sure that everybody understood and was in support of the process that we're asking for today, which is our ability to just move forward with a single read on these policies. Again, they're relatively minor revisions to those policies, and with the change in boards, it just seems like, you know, we just came in one meeting late. We would have ideally had this, you know, at the previous meeting, and you would have had first read, but we just didn't manage to get that. So I just want to pause on that before we go into policy JLF. And I also need to. We good? Move forward? All right. Okay, so then for policy JLF, that is child abuse prevention, reporting, and education. And I think you have in the packet a summary slide that shows you what each of those revisions are. So that's what I'm going to be talking from. So if you want to along on your screens, you can do that. But this first one, JLF, proposes some changes that are based on changes to Maine law, and specifically the change is that, as you may recall, there was a change in state law that brought back to age 6 the age of required school attendance, and as a result of that, the requirement to report to child abuse hotlines any violations, any suspected violations. And so that's what this, the substantive portion of this policy change. In addition to that, sort of advised by our attorneys, we are removing the reporting procedures specifically from the policy and instead making those a procedure which will be JLFR. And in addition to that, we changed language across that policy to where it refers to principal to lead building administrator, and you'll also see that policy CF, which we'll talk about later, makes that change. And the last change is the addition of service providers into that actual policy. So those are the proposed changes to policy JLF.
Is there any questions on the motion? Seeing none, any public comment on the motion? Seeing none, any board discussion? Seeing none, we'll put it to vote. All those in favor of approving changes to policy JLF, child abuse reporting, prevention, and education, please indicate. It's unanimous with the students voting with the majority. Next, consideration and action to approve policy AC, non-discrimination, equal opportunity and affirmative action. Is there a motion? Ms. Morioni, second by Ms. Davis. Superintendent, please speak to the motion.
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier in the introduction, this is one of the policies that you had just approved a month and a half ago, but the revisions to this policy, the substantive revision, is that it adds gender identity in addition to sexual orientation, to the language around what are the protected categories. It requires us to develop procedures to go with that, and for the members of the policy committee, you'll remember that one of the contingencies before we brought this was that there was language that had removed a section, and as I discussed that with council, they said that was not required. It was something that they were recommending because it was difficult for us to actually enforce that. It was a provision that required us to hold any vendors accountable for substantively following this policy as well, and so that is obviously challenging to do. But given that it wasn't required that we eliminate it, challenging as it is, it remains in the policy, and so you'll note that was not struck.
Thank you, Superintendent. Are there any questions on the motion? Seeing none, any public comment on the motion? And seeing none, any board discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving policy AC, non-discrimination / equal opportunity and affirmative action, please indicate. It's unanimous with the students voting with the majority. Thank you. Next, consideration and action to approve policy ACAD, hazing. Is there a motion? Ms. Davis, second by Mr. Balfans. Will the superintendent please speak to the motion?
I'm on a roll now.
Yes, we are.
Yeah. So again, this is a policy that was recently revised. The statutory language defining hazing was changed in the last round of the legislature, and so that is the substantive change to this. In addition to that, there is a change, rescission of instead of revoking. And again, in this one, there was some language that had been moved by by council prior, and based on the conversation that we had in the policy committee, that's reinstated, so that was not deleted, and so that's it for this policy.
Thank you, Superintendent. Any questions on the motion? Seeing none. Any board discussion? Excuse me. Any public comment on the motion? Seeing none. Any board discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor of approving policy ACAD, hazing, please indicate. And that's unanimous with the students voting with a majority. Next. Consideration and action to approve policy CB, school superintendent. Is there a motion? Ms. Davis, second by Ms. Morioni. Will the superintendent speak to the motion?
Yeah, so this only changes the name of the board to Board of Public Education, and also updates to use non-gendered language.
Thank you. Any questions on the motion? Seeing none, any public comment on the motion? Seeing none, any board discussion? Ms. Morioni?
This is really minor, but there's to be a space between the word "the" and "board" on the second paragraph.
Superintendent makes a note of that.
I'm working on it. Between,
The first sentence of the second paragraph.
I think it's there. Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Ms. Morioni. Any other board discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor of approving policy CB, school superintendent, please indicate. And that's unanimous with the students voting with the majority. Thank you. Next, consideration and action to approve policy CBA, superintendent job description. Is there a motion? Ms. Davis, second by Mr. Atkinson. Will the superintendent please speak to the motion?
Yep. So this is also changing the name of the board, and because the superintendent doesn't have enough to do, it also adds pre-K and adult education to the job description. So it's all good. So.
I told you we were going to keep you busy. Are there any questions on the motion? Seeing none, is there any public comment on the motion? Seeing none, any board discussion? Nope. Well, we expect the superintendent to be busy, and we'll keep adding something to this policy as often as possible. All those in favor of approving policy CBA, superintendent job description, please indicate. And that's unanimous with the students voting with the majority. Next, superintendent.
Evaluation of the superintendent.
Stack it up. Consideration and action to approve policy CBI, evaluation of superintendent. Is there a motion? Ms. Davis, second by Ms. Figdor. Superintendent, please speak to the motion.
Yeah, so this one, just again, changing the name of the board, and in this particular case, adding the new evaluation protocol, which is what you're actually using now, which was the revision work of the policy and the finance committee over the course of this year. So it's just updating the actual rubric to reflect the new evaluation protocol.
Any questions on the motion? Seeing none. Any public comment on the motion? Seeing none. Any board discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor of approving policy CBI, evaluation of superintendent, please indicate. And that's unanimous with the students voting with a majority. We're getting there. Consideration and action to approve policy CCA, administrative organization. Is there a motion? Ms. Davis, second by Ms. Bondo. The superintendent, please speak to the motion.
This one has the honor of having the least changes of any. It is just adding parentheses board after because this policy was revised in 2016, so it actually has Portland Board of Public Education in the name, and it's just putting a parentheses after it saying board. So it really is fairly minor.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Superintendent. Any questions on the motion? Seeing none. Any public comment on the motion? Seeing none. Any board discussion? Well, I'm happy we've all run out of wit. All those in favor of approving policy CCA, administrative organization, please indicate. And that's unanimous with the students voting with the majority. Next, consideration and action to approve policy CF, school building administration. Is there a motion? Ms. Figdor, second by Ms. Davis. Will the superintendent please speak to the motion?
Yes, but I'm looking at the policy in front of me, and this is not, so this does not have, we discussed changing to designated lead building administrator, and that's not reflected here. So I would actually, I'm not 100% sure how to do this, but I think that the intent and what we reviewed was to change principal in each instance. Is that in yours? Does it show that?
I'm looking at the draft version, and it is correct in the draft version.
And also in the one marked as final.
Okay. Not in the one that I have in my packet. So as long as it's there. Yep, okay. So that's the one that you should be approving, and so that is, that's correct. It's just not in the one that I have. So that's the substantive change, so really it's changing to non-gendered language, the new name of the board, and then replacing principal with designated lead building administrator, and that's for obvious reasons to reflect the fact that we don't always have principals in all of our buildings, and so that's the substantive change there.
All right. Thank you, Superintendent. Any other questions on the motion? Excuse me, are there any questions on the motion? Seeing none, is there any public comment on the motion? Seeing none, any discussion? None. All those in favor of approving policy CF, school building administration, please indicate. And that's unanimous with the students voting with the majority. Next, consideration and action to approve policy CH, policy implementation regulations. Is there a motion? Ms. Davis, second by Mr. Atkinson. Will the superintendent please speak to the motion?
This is, again, the non-gendered language, as well as the change of the school board's name, and that's the extent of the changes there.
Thank you, Superintendent. Any questions on the motion? Excuse me. Yeah, any questions? Seeing none, any public comment on the motion? Seeing none, any board discussion? None. Those in favor of approving policy CH, policy implementation regulations, please indicate. And that's unanimous with the students voting with the majority. Last one, consideration and action to approve policy HD, administration and policy absence. Is there a motion? Ms. Davis, second by Mr. Balfins. Superintendent, please speak to the motion.
Yeah, and this one also just changing the name of the board, and that's the only change.
Thank you, Superintendent. Any questions on the motion? Seeing none, any public comment on the motion? Seeing none, any board discussion? Put it to the vote. All those in favor of approving policy CHD, administration and policy absence, please indicate. That's unanimous with the students voting with the majority. Thank you all. I know we ran through those rather quick. That document that has the summary of the changes, I think is really helpful, kind of allows us to run through this. And I just want to commend the work at the policy committee. I was there when you guys prepped this up, and it was impressive. I mean, you guys knocked out an immense amount of work, and we're so diligent doing it. I don't think the speed with which we ran through these today does it justice. I mean, it was really, I was in the corner of that room, kind of literally answering emails and kind of getting caught up and keeping one ear on the work. And you guys were just rock stars that night. It's amazing. Moving forward, I think Assistant Superintendent Aaron Townsend is going to be staffing that committee. So we've taken a whole lot of work off of his plate by doing this tonight. So again, thank you everybody in that committee for your work. All right, next, personnel items. Consideration and action to approve the personnel items listed. Election of probationary teachers. Motion, Ms. Davis, second by Ms. Trevorrow. Superintendent, please speak to the motion.
Yes, and I have Assistant HR Director Richard Moore here to help us with these items.
Good evening.
Welcome.
Tonight we're bringing forward two recent hires for your approval. Both of these positions are included in the approved budget for fiscal year 2020.
Thank you, Richard. Are there any questions on the motion? Seeing none, there is no public comment on personnel items. Any board discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor of approving personnel items listed, election of probationary teachers, please indicate. And that's unanimous with the students voting with the majority.
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
Have a happy holiday. Perfect. Given that it's before the hour of 10 p.m., is there any public comment on items not on this evening's agenda? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment portion of our meeting. Here we are. Is there a motion, before we adjourn, actually, just want to one more time let the public know that after we adjourn this meeting, we're going to go into executive session for the next step in the superintendent evaluation process. So having said that, is there a motion to adjourn the business meeting? Ms. Trevorrow, second by Ms. Davis. All those in favor, please indicate. It's unanimous with the students voting in favor. We've adjourned at 9:07 p.m. Thank you all.